had politicians, we've had people across, we've had professional athletes, and tonight we have a real treat for me. We have Dr. Jeff Gurian, and Jeff's the most famous person that you've never heard of. Jeff is in the world of comedy, and for those of you that know, I own Gotham Comedy Club, I co-own it, and when I wanted to interview someone in the world of comedy that I thought could really relay the best stories, would have the most insight, immediately we came to Jeff. Jeff he was a practicing dentist for many years, specialized in cosmetic dentistry, but he was a comedy writer at the same exact time. He was the head writer for the Friar Club Roast for, what was it, 12 years?
12 years, yeah.
For 12 years. He's written for every comic that you've ever heard of, even a lot of ones that you haven't. So really, the old timers is where he kind of cut his teeth, and he still writes for comedians today, and he's still also a performing comic. So he's multi-talented. He truly is the most interesting man in the world, and it is my honor. Before we get started, I did want to say that for those people that have been watching this series, our next event is going to be an open Seder. It's April 16th, and it's a Zoom Seder. So if anyone's interested, you can go to the website, you can go to our Facebook page, YouTube page. It's all going to be there, and it's going to be fantastic. So we look forward to you guys joining. With that, you ready to start?
I'm ready, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really happy to be here, by the way. It was worth a 2-hour trip from the city.
I left out that Jeff's also written and published 8 books. 5 on comedy and 3 on...
3 on happiness.
On happiness. So hopefully we get a little bit of both tonight.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about... I read in the New York Times, there was an article about Jeff in the New York Times that said you knew early on that you wanted to be a dentist and a comic. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I must have been a really weird kid, because I figured out when I was 12 years old what I wanted to be. Most kids have no idea. They want to be a fireman or policeman or whatever, and they change their mind. I knew I wanted to be a doctor of some kind. For some reason, I felt compelled to figure out what I wanted to do when I was 12 years old. And I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I was a very sensitive child. And I knew that I was too sensitive to handle life and death situations. And so I was having orthodontia done at the time, and I'm like, this is great. I can make people look beautiful. So I'll be a dentist, you know? And I don't have to worry about anyone dying. The worst that could happen is their tooth dies, but the rest of them will be alive, and I'll be fine, you know? And I could handle that. And I was already writing comedy. I was writing stuff for the amusement of my friends. And I remember laying in bed awake at night, I was thinking to myself, this is very confusing. I want to be a dentist, but I want to write comedy, and how can you do both? It didn't make sense to me, because there had never been anybody before that I knew of that did anything like that. And somehow, I managed to bring those two worlds together. Cindy Adams said she figured it out. She said, I make people laugh to see if they have any teeth missing. That's the thing. So I just followed through. I never changed. I just stayed with my 12-year-old dream.
And why comedy? Was it that you were just a funny kid? Was it an escape mechanism from anything? I know you grew up in the Bronx, pretty tough neighborhood.
My parents had a great sense of humor, especially my dad. And he used to take me to comedy films, you know, to see the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy and Amos and Andy. And there was one other group. I don't know why I block on them. There's 2 guys. Anyway, pardon me? Oh, Abbott and Costello. Thank you. Abbott and Costello. Exactly. And I loved it. And we'd go to the movies a lot. And my dad had such a great sense of humor. So I really, and my mom too, but my dad was the one who he indulged in comedy. And I think that gave me my love for comedy. As a kid, when there would be a comedian on the Ed Sullivan Show, I would just run in to watch. It fascinated me that you could get up and make people laugh, make complete strangers laugh by what you thought was funny, which is really the hardest thing in the world to do. You know, if you're a singer and you go out on stage, even if you're not that good, the audience will applaud politely. But if you're a comedian, your life is on the line. Either they laugh or they don't. No one's laughing to be polite. You know, if they don't think you're funny, it's horrible. And so
we've both been on the wrong end of that.
Yeah, it's a very, you know, sometimes I'm out on stage, and even when people are laughing a lot, I'm thinking to myself, why do I need this? You know, what is it about this that is so important to me to make other people laugh? But there's a real joy in entertaining people and making, especially laughing. Laughter is the best medicine. It's, you know, humor is so important. Not only on a chemical level, it releases endorphins, but in my own life, it got me through so many things. About 6 years ago, I had what they call a widowmaker heart attack. It was a very serious heart attack. It came out of nowhere. I had never been sick in my life. And all of a sudden, the middle of the day, I get this pain in my chest. I thought it was muscular. I was rubbing it, and it was feeling better. And I was like, well, you can't rub away a heart attack. It's probably I was working out too much or something like that. And I had an appointment with a chiropractor. It was my first visit with this new chiropractor. And it was raining very hard. And I almost wasn't going to go because I don't like to go out in the rain because of my hair. It sounds really stupid. It sounds really stupid, but that's the truth. And so, but I decided to go. And I said, maybe he could take away this pain in my chest if it's muscular. So I get on the subway, and the pain's getting worse. And I'm out in the street. I had about 6 blocks to walk, and the pain was getting pretty intense. And I'm rubbing, and now it's not working so well. And I decided I should probably tell someone because, you know, first of all, it's embarrassing to tell someone that you think you're having a heart attack. Because, like, what if you're not, right? You know, I mean, just to stop strangers in the street and tell them that you think there's something wrong. But I had no choice. So I turned down 50th Street on the way to Radio City. I don't know what made me turn on that block. I didn't have to go there. I had to go further down. I see a police van with 4 cops in the van. I'm holding an umbrella. It's pouring rain. I knock on the window, and in my best Jewish way, I say, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I'm having a heart attack. And the cop says, well, I think you should go to the hospital. And I was like, well, that's why I'm telling you. I'm not just telling everyone. You know, I thought that they would say, hop in, and we'll put the siren on, and will take me to the hospital. But that's not what happened. The guy says to me, well, we're stuck in traffic. You can see, he says, I think it'll be faster if you walk. So I said, well, where's the nearest hospital? And he didn't know. So he takes out his phone, and he starts looking for a hospital. None of the cops knew where there was a hospital. Now I'm on 50th Street and 6th Avenue, right? So he says to me, do you have Google Maps? In the middle of I'm standing there with an umbrella having a heart attack. He's asking me if I have a Google Maps. So I said, no. He said, well, I think you should download Google Maps. And that's when I walked away, because I said, this is a Woody Allen movie. It can't even be possible. I'm telling the cop I have a heart attack. He's telling me to download Google Maps. So I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm going to a chiropractor. I'll see what I could do. So I could only get another half a block because it got very intense. There's another cop on the corner, and he's on a walkie-talkie, and he's directing traffic. And I say the same thing. Sorry to bother you. I think I'm having a heart attack. And he says, stand on the side. So I stand on the side. I'm waiting a couple of minutes, and I say, are they coming? He said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't call them yet. No one was taking it very seriously. And I'll tell you why. I think it was because I was very calm. Because of my spiritual work for so many years, I realized that this is my path. For whatever reason, this weird thing is happening to me, but this is my path. And I don't know why, but I have to see it through. And so that's my feeling, because when he finally called, a fire truck came. Firemen are EMTs, and very often they're the first on the scene. So fire truck pulls up, 4 or 5 guys get off the truck, they're like, who's the patient? I said, me. So the guy says, climb up on the truck. I said, really? He goes, now we're just effing with you, like that. Everybody was joking, right? So finally an ambulance came, and they took me away, and they put the IV in my arm, and I had the presence of mind to call one of my daughters and my doctor to say that I'm on my way in an ambulance to the hospital, and I think it's a heart attack, but I'm not sure. And then I feel something squirt on my face. And I was like, what is that? And the guy said, it's nitroglycerin. I said, that's supposed to go under my tongue, not on my face. He goes, that's close enough. So everyone was like taking it very lightly. It was and then when I get to the hospital, they wheel me out, and the doors to the emergency room won't open. The guy is sliding me back and forth like a credit card in a slot. And the doors won't open. He had to physically climb up on the door. He goes, one way or another, we're going to get you in there. I'm like, you think so, really? So I laid in the emergency room for 9 hours. And luckily, some smart guy started me on a blood thinner. They were under the impression. I had the kind of heart attack that didn't show on an EKG. It figures I'm very different than other people, I guess. And so I had to get a really special kind of heart attack. And so when they finally got me into the room, it took 9 hours until they found a room for me. And they saved me. They put in a stent, but I was joking with the surgeon on the operating table. I wasn't fully asleep. And I actually felt what they were doing. They were unplugging the artery in my heart. It was the main artery. They call it the LAD artery. It was the main artery to my heart. And I remember saying to him, I feel you in my heart, not in a romantic way, but I feel you in my heart. And they were all laughing, the whole crew, because I was joking on the operating table, because it's the only way I know how to handle things. And he said, I'll give you more anesthetic. And he came to my room later that day, and he hugged me. And he said, I want you to know that you're a miracle. And I said, well, you're the guy who's the miracle, because you figured out how to save me. And I was back on stage 5 days later performing. And the owner of the comedy club said to me, what are you, crazy? You just had a heart attack. And I said, yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot. It's really hard to get a spot. So that's the power of positive thinking, that I had to work very hard to stay positive. Because when you're in a negative space, your immune system is not functioning as well. And you can't really fight things off. And when you're in a positive space, your body vibrates at a higher level. And your immune system functions better. So when I was in the hospital with COVID double pneumonia, I got it in March 2020. Well, I'm a trendsetter. I got it as soon as it came out. I didn't want to wait. I got it right away. And it was horrible. It was a nightmare. And I was in the hospital. I was sick for 2 weeks before I had to call an ambulance. And when they took me to the hospital, I couldn't take it anymore. I finally had. They were warning people not to go to the emergency room. In March of 2020, it was new. Nobody knew anything. And they were concerned that if you had a health history, especially a heart history, not to be around those germs. But I had no choice. I couldn't help it anymore. The pain was too great, and I had so many symptoms. And they wheeled me into the emergency room. Well, 2 men came in hazmat suits, the ambulance team. And it was the first time that I experienced a real act of kindness. And I want to stress this because it's so important, how important a small act of kindness is. One of the men took my hand and he said to me, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And I can't tell you how important that was, just that little simple act of kindness, because with this illness, you're isolated, you're alone. You can't have anybody near you, you can't have anybody helping you. So I had been really sick for 2 weeks all by myself. My kids couldn't come, I wouldn't allow them to come. And so they wheeled me into the emergency room, and they put me in a cubicle next to a woman who was screaming, literally screaming with every breath that she took. And the tendency is to think, why me? Why is this happening to me? When you're in a situation like that, it's kind of normal to feel sorry for yourself. And my spiritual training has taught me to think, why not me? Whoever promised me that my life is supposed to be perfect, that nothing uncomfortable is ever supposed to happen to me. So I had to work very hard to step outside of my own mind and start to think about this woman and how scared she must be or how much pain she must be in order to be screaming with every breath. And they were almost going to send me home until they x-rayed my lungs, and a pulmonary specialist came in. He said, I'm sorry to tell you that you have COVID double pneumonia. And they found a room for me. They put me in isolation. But again, comedy helped. I had to work very, very hard through my training to learn how to stay in a positive frame of mind. Because after my first 2 days in isolation, they put me in a room with 3 other very sick men, all with the virus. And I was hoping they were kidding me when they told me that the man in the bed next to me was from Wuhan, China. I'm like, that can't even happen, but it happened to me. Okay? I'm laying there next to patient 0, and he's coughing and choking into the air. And when I expressed my concern to the nurse, she told me not to worry, and she pointed to a thin curtain that was hanging between us. And I thought to myself, how foolish of me to have been concerned. everyone knows if you want to protect yourself from a deadly virus, you hang a thin curtain around you, you know. Like, too bad Dr. Fauci didn't know about the thin curtain approach. So that's a long answer to your question. But,
Well,
you know, positive comedy and positive energy, it's true that comedy is the best medicine, that laughter is the best medicine. It releases endorphins, and it allows you to see the world in a different way. You know, it's very easy. I write a lot about happiness and obstacles that we have to overcome. You know, I was a very severe stutterer through my 20s and into my 30s even. I stuttered so badly that I couldn't say my name. I could never say Gurian. Most stutterers have a very hard time saying their own name. And as you can see, I no longer stutter. I consider it grace, but I figured out how not to stutter. I worked on myself for many years to develop a cure for stuttering. And now, as an avocation, I work with stutterers all over the world, online, to teach people how not to stutter, because it has to do with thought, and thought is very powerful. And I'm a very big believer in the power of prayer and the power of thought. And when I was in the hospital, Ron Bennington, who I always credit with this, he's a host on Sirius XM as one of the biggest comedy shows. And I was a regular on there for 2 years. And he announced on the radio that I was in the hospital with COVID. And I started getting literally hundreds of messages from people that I didn't know, people that I did know, but people that I didn't know as well. And as I said, I'm a very big believer in the power of prayer and the power of thought. And when that many people are focusing their energy on something, I believe that it has an effect. And I can't tell you how much it helped me. I was on there this afternoon on the show, and we were recounting it because it's my 2nd anniversary of being out of the hospital. And I said, you know, just knowing that so many people are thinking of you, it's a shame that you have to be so sick to know that people care about you. That's another thing. In our daily lives, we don't really tell people what they mean to us, but we should, because it's very important. And it helped me tremendously. I was too sick to answer anybody. He even said that 3 or 4 days would go by before I could even answer him, and they were concerned that I would be on a ventilator or something, but I was too weak to answer. But knowing, just the fact of knowing that people were thinking of me and that I meant something to people was really a factor in me recovering.
Well, it's clear from your answer and just from your life that you radiate positivity and kindness, and that's not always simpatico with comedy, as you do know. Even though our job as comics is to make people laugh and feel good, many comics don't exactly radiate positive thought. But I was in Jeff's apartment before coming here. I picked him up at his place, and he has on the wall pictures of every comedian that you've ever heard of, every famous comedian. No one in the world, if you said to me tomorrow, and I own a comedy club, you need to get pictures with this many comedians, I couldn't do it. So what's your secret? How do you meet this many people, and how do you have so many people think so fondly of you in the world of comedy?
Well, first, it's very special. You know, people have asked me that, and I don't really have a good answer. It's interesting to me that I was able to meet so many people, and I took pictures for a reason. I never got one autograph in my life. I was not interested in that. But my life was always like a movie to me. It was very interesting to see how it unfolded. And sometimes you'll meet somebody, like if you're a fan of somebody, you may meet them in a group. And they'll be polite and they'll say hello, but they might not be aware of your presence because you're meeting them in a group of people. But when you meet somebody one-on-one, unless they're insane, they have to know you're there. You know, it can't be like, they can't not notice you if you're talking to them alone, one-on-one. And at that moment, I would always take a picture to capture the moment because it was so special to me, because I grew up knowing nobody in show business. I didn't know one person. My grandfather owned a nightclub in the Bronx. It was a hot spot in the Bronx. And so I was exposed to entertainers as a little kid, and gangsters and people like that would hang out there. And I always had a fascination with that. But I started meeting people. I mean, in the early days, you know, my goal, I only had 3 people I ever wanted to meet: Woody Allen, Salvador Dali, and the Beach Boys. And I met them all. And I spent an evening, Woody Allen read my earliest material. I was sending him notes on my dental school cards. I was still in school. I was a junior in school, and he was appearing in a play called Play It Again, Sam, on Broadway. And I don't even know how I got the money to get tickets. I must have saved up for months. And I knew even in those days that if you wanted to meet a big star, you had to show them that you're sane. There were no really stalkers in those days, but most stars are not going to the theater hoping to meet young men afterwards, you know? So I said, well, what am I going to do to show that I'm sane? So I only could think of two things. You either wear a tie or you bring a pretty girl with you. And I didn't have a tie. And I knew one pretty girl, and she hated me because we had just broken up. But I begged her. She knew that my dream was to meet Woody Allen. So I begged her to come with me to meet Woody Allen, and she agreed. And I was so naive, I didn't know to even wait till the end of the show. I was sending him notes as if I knew him. And I would leave them with the stage manager. For a few months before this happened, I would leave notes. Woody, I haven't seen you in a long time. It's Jeffrey. I'll be coming to see the show. And I had no idea whether he was ever seeing them or not. So the night of the show, I drop off another note on the back of my dental school card. And it says, Woody, I'm here, and I'll be back during intermission. I didn't even know to wait till the end of the show. You never interrupt a star during intermission. So intermission comes, and I'm in a panic. I'm really nervous. And this girl says, well, you can't back out. You have to do it. I'm here with you. So I go back, and the stage manager is not there. You know, these days, if you wanted to go backstage, there's a million security. You can't go anywhere, you know. But in those days, it was a different thing. So the stage manager is not there. So I grab her hand, and I run up these stairs. And it was the wrong stairs. I went to the roof by mistake. So I come back down. The stage manager's there. He says, can I help you? And I say, Woody's expecting me. Just like that. He says, well, go right in. So I go in. His dressing room is empty. His dressing room is empty, and he's in Tony Roberts' dressing room with the whole cast. And now I'm really nervous. I'm like, how am I going to face the whole cast? She goes, you have to do this. You came all this way, and I'm here with you. So I went up to the door, and I can picture it like it was yesterday. Woody's sitting on a couch across the room, and I walk over, and I go like this. And he goes, and I said, yes. And he walks over, and he's holding my card. He's literally holding my card. And he said to me, you must be Jeff. And at that moment, I lost it completely. I'm meeting my idol, and I started saying ridiculous things to him, like, let's open up a day camp and throw winter clothes at people. And let's walk low like we used to in Europe. And he looked at the girl, and he goes, this guy's an effing nut. Just like that. And I realized I was too intense. I was overexcited because I was meeting my idol. So he said to me, well, look, so I told him why I was there. I said, I write comedy, and everyone says that I write stuff like you, and I was hoping that you would read my material. He says, well, I'm in the middle of a show. Do you think you can come back tomorrow night? And I said, no, I'm much too busy. No, I said, of course, I'll come back tomorrow night. So I had to beg the same girl to come with me, right? And she agreed to come with me. And it was pouring rain, and he sat with me after the show, and he read all of my stuff. And I don't even think I had it in script form. I think it was ideas in a little envelope. And he sat with me backstage, and he encouraged me. Now, my dream, I thought he would say, Jeffrey, I'm going to quit this. Let's go make movies together. That didn't happen. But he said to me, you're very funny, and you're very visual, and I think you should take your ideas and make a film out of them. And many years later, I did. It was a film that I made for the Toyota Comedy Festival. It was called The Men Who Series. And it was men who do very unusual things, like men who take a pitchfork to the movies, men who enjoy Latin dancing with tools. I had a guy who did the tango with a wrench. That was unbelievable. You've probably seen a lot of Latin dancing with tools, but not like this guy. And you know who was in one of the films? Peter Dinklage, one of the biggest stars in the world from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
It was many years before he was famous. And I did a film called Men Who Dance Where They're Not Supposed to. And, you know, in New York City, it's very hard to find parking. There were all these signs. So I had an artist make up a perfect no parking sign, but it said no dancing Tuesdays and Thursdays or any other time. And we posted it on a street on Broadway, and Peter Dinklage got arrested for dancing in a no dancing zone. And I have that. It's on my YouTube channel, so you never know what's going to happen. But I got to work with the greats from yesteryear. If you're old enough to remember Milton Berle, Mr. Television, the reason they called him Mr. Television was because people in this country actually bought TVs to watch his show, the Texaco Star Theater. In the 1940s, TV was new. A lot of people couldn't afford them, they didn't have them, and they would line up in the street and watch TV through the windows of the stores that sold TVs. And he was my sponsor in the Friars Club. That was one of my greatest honors. And I got to write for Jerry Lewis, and I got to write for Sid Caesar's Friars Roast, and Henny Youngman, his 89th birthday roast I wrote for TV. And I got to meet all of those guys, all the greats from the golden age, up until the present. If you know Nick Kroll and John Mulaney, they had me open their Broadway show for them, the Oh Hello show. I never ever thought that something like that would happen. I'm on there, you know, Nick and John came over to me one night at a party, and they said, could we take a picture with you? And I said, sure. I didn't know who they were really at the time. And Nick said to me, if I ever get a TV show, would you be on it? And I said, absolutely. And a few years later, I'm working at my desk one day, and I get a call from Los Angeles. And the producer says, Nick Kroll wants to know if you'd come out to LA and be on his show. He had a show called Kroll Show on Comedy Central that ran for 3 seasons. And I said, sure. And I wound up being in a sketch called Too Much Tuna, which is very silly. And they prank people by giving them a very big tuna sandwich like this. They think it's very funny to give people a huge tuna sandwich. And I'm the first person to be pranked with, what a thing for your resume, right? To be pranked with too much tuna. But it's got over 1 million views on YouTube, on the Comedy Central site. And they made me a jacket. Do you guys know who Curtis Lewa is, the Guardian Angels? Oh, so I used to be his dentist. So we're very good friends. I know him for 30 years, and I encouraged him to run for mayor, and if he didn't wear that red beret, he might have won, you know? I don't know that. He said he had 17 cats, but he's a great guy, and he wears a Guardian Angels jacket. So Nick Kroll and John Mulaney used to talk about him in their show, and they didn't know that I knew him, and they made me a jacket, an exact replica of the Guardian Angels, but my jacket says Gurian Angels. And they got 2 models to wear Gurian Angels t-shirts, and they had me open their Broadway show wearing that jacket. So, I've had a lot of very unusual experiences, and I captured most of them in pictures. The only one, I didn't get a picture with Salvador Dali, which I regret, because it was a long time ago, and nobody was carrying cameras in those days. There was no cell phones. It was just a crazy story that I spent an evening with him. And the Beach Boys, too, I didn't get pictures with. Years later, they came to do a Friars event on the red carpet, and I got to tell them how they saved me in high school from depression, that I used to listen to the Beach Boys and it would make me happy, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons that I write books about happiness, because it's so important.
It's fantastic. Woody obviously was your first, if you will. And I know in the car you had said that the first person that you wrote for professionally really was Rodney.
Rodney Dangerfield he was the first big star that I wrote for.
Okay. So I know you're a person who's big on gratitude. What was the first time that you wrote for a comic, spent time with a comic, where you really just were starstruck and overwrought with gratitude that you were living this life?
That was probably Rodney, because I loved Rodney, and I got introduced to him. I was writing for a comic named Dick Capri, who was in the show Catskills on Broadway. And he's a wonderful comedian. You know, and it's interesting, because you can be in that world your whole life, and there'll be a lot of people that don't know you. Like, I'm friends with Russell Peters, and Russell Peters, he sold out Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people come to see him. But if I ask people, a lot of people say they never heard of him. You could be very famous in certain circles, and people still don't know who you are, you know? And, but I was a very big fan of Rodney, and Dick Capri introduced me to him and told him that I was a funny writer. And so I started writing jokes for Rodney, and then he started doing them on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which was incredibly exciting for me. I can't tell you, you know. To hear a famous comedian doing your lines, because Rodney was not a conversationalist. He would do jokes to perform, and then Johnny would call him to the couch, and he would do more jokes, you know. And I wrote him jokes like, if I can remember, I don't do a good Rodney impression, but he would be like, I'm all right now, but last week was rough. He said, I went to one of those custom bed shops. I said, what kind of bed would you recommend for a guy like me? He said, single. So, and he loved that joke, and it's such a simple joke, a one-word punchline, because in comedy, the less words you use, the better, you know? And then I remember one night he did an opening line. He paid me $250 for this one line because he liked it so much, and it was like, he always started the same way, you know, I'm all right now, but last week was rough. He said, I bought one of those whirlpools for my bathtub. The first night I used it, I lost 3 of my best ships. And such a clean, simple line, and he loved it, and that was his opening line with Johnny Carson. Somewhere I have a videotape of that, but to me that was so exciting, and I was so grateful to have that opportunity. And it was like writing for him, for such a superstar, was what started people hearing about me, you know, to become what they known as an industry name. Mm-hmm. You know, not necessarily that the public knows about you, but people in the industry would trust you to let you write for them. Because a big star could go to anybody. What does he need me for? You know, when I was writing for Joan Rivers, she didn't even know I was a dentist. I didn't tell, well, it's not exactly a prerequisite. No one hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of the fact. Yeah. You know, and when I went to her house, she contacted me. She had seen my work at a Friar's Roast, I guess, and then she had her representative contacted me and said, Joan is interested in meeting with you to talk to you about writing for her. I said, oh, that's great, it's really exciting. And she gave me her address, and she lived near me, like on 62nd Street in this gorgeous place, right? And so I thought she must know that I'm a doctor, because most big stars don't invite you to come to their home, you know? And so I showed up at her house, and the doorman said to me, you'll have to wait a little while because she just sprained her ankle and she's in a lot of pain. And I thought to myself, wow, what a great opportunity. I can write her a prescription for painkillers. And she'll love me, and then she'll hire me, because how many comedy writers can write a prescription for painkillers, right? So I finally go up to her apartment, and she's sitting there with a group of people. And she introduces me to everyone as Mr. Gurian, so I knew she didn't know. So I didn't say a word about it. And we got along very well, and she wound up hiring me, and I was her personal writer for quite a while. And one day, I'm in my office doing dental work, and my nurse had strict instructions, never interrupt me when I'm with a patient unless it's for show business. So she would come in and she'd say, Dr. Rivers is on the phone, and Dr. Lewis is calling. The only one nobody believed was Dr. Dangerfield. Nobody believed that. So I go to the phone, and it's Joan, and she's in Las Vegas, and she calls up, and she says, what do you do during the day? I said, I work. And she said, well, obviously you work, but what is it that you do? And I knew she knew, because I had been doing a lot of TV press. They were doing stories about me. And so I said to her, is this concerning the vicious rumor going around that I'm a dentist? I said, you know, I've heard of accusing people of a lot of things, but that's really low. And she said, why didn't you ever tell me? And I said, because I didn't think it was pertinent. I said, and I used that line. I said, because no one hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of the fact. She goes, I love it. I think it's great. And we got along so well. She was one of the sweetest people that I ever worked with. And many years later, I saw her up at Sirius XM. They brought me in to surprise her, because I was up there a lot. As I said, I was a regular for a couple of years, and I would bring on special guests, like friends, famous comedians that were in town. Russell Peters and D.L. Hughley. Trevor Noah came as a favor to me. And Joan was there. She was promoting her new book, Diary of a Mad Diva. I think it was one of the last things that she did before she passed away. And they said, we want to surprise Joan and show her that you're here. So they brought me in, and I was promoting one of my books. And to give you the kind of person that she was so kind, I wanted to give her a copy she's like, no, well, first of all, I was congratulating her on her book, and she said, no, I want to talk to you about your book. And she had her assistant take a picture of my book, and I said, I'll give you a copy. She goes, no, I want to buy a copy. I want to support you. And that's the kind of person that she was. She was just so kind and very sweet, just really nice. And it was a tragedy how we lost her, you know, a medical problem like that.
Yeah.
But
she was a legend.
A legend, a legend. So I was always grateful to be, because if you're a dentist and you're writing for people that no one ever heard of, it means nothing. It's like the Ed Sullivan Show. He's got a knife-throwing act. He's a plate spinner. You know, I didn't want to look like a novelty. I wanted to be taken seriously in each field. Because when I was in my office, I didn't joke around. I don't want to tell jokes to patients. I don't think patients want to hear. I created an atmosphere of humor. But you know, I dislocated my shoulder once, and when I called my doctor, he said to me, don't make a habit of this. And I told him afterwards, that's a stupid thing to say to somebody when they're in pain. I said, if you want to tell a joke, tell them after they feel better, not when my arm was hanging out of the socket. I was doubled over in pain, and that's when he chooses to tell me a joke. Someone must have said to him, doctors should try to have a good sense of humor, but you have to have a bedside manner. You know, you have to know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So after I was all better, I told them, that's not a good time to tell a joke when someone is in a lot of pain. That's not going to help, you know. Tell them afterwards.
So obviously you realize that at that point you're writing for some of the top people in the business. You're getting positive feedback, so you know that you can write comedy, you know that you see things in a funny way. And getting back to where we started is just from being a dentist, it seems like you had this need to serve, just to bring positivity to the world. At what point did you realize and say, hey, I want to perform my jokes. I want to write my jokes for me?
Yeah, that's a good question. It took me a long time. I had fear. I've been fighting fear all my life on different things. It's one of the reasons, the second happiness book that I wrote is called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And for some reason, I don't know why, I had a very loving and supportive family, but I grew up with a lot of fears. I had a fear of the dark when I was a kid, but I made myself go in the dark. I hated the fact that I had fears. And as a little kid, I made myself go in the dark and do things that were really scary to me to show myself that it was okay. It's how I cured myself of stuttering. I had to confront my fears because as much as I hated stuttering, I was afraid to stop. And I see that in a lot of the people that I work with. As much as I hated it, it was so much a part of my identity that who would I be if I didn't stutter anymore? You become a different person. So I had a fear of performing on stage, because if you start doing comedy in your 20s and nobody knows you, you have the freedom to bomb. And it's no big deal because nobody knows you. You might feel bad, but no one's going to remember that because you're just a kid. But by the time I wanted to start performing, too many people knew of me. And it was like, you know, when I met Chris Rock's younger brothers that are friends of mine, Tony Rock and Jordan Rock, I really felt bad for them. It's very hard when you have someone who's so famous and you have to live up to them. And so it took me a lot of years to get the courage. And I had to work through it in my mind. And I had to tell myself stuff like, if they can do it, I have to be able to do it. I challenge my uncomfortability on a daily basis. I try to do everything that makes me uncomfortable. To the point where in 2019, just before the pandemic, I made myself go to Japan all alone. It was the scariest thing I could think of to do because traveling makes me very nervous. I have ADHD. I get lost wherever I go. You know, I studied Japanese. I took level 1 3 times because 2 years in a row, a friend of mine who has a Japanese wife was going to go with me. And 2 years in a row, he had to cancel out at the last minute, and I was so disappointed. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to depend on anybody else because otherwise I'll never go. For some reason, I was fascinated with Japanese culture, and I signed up at the Japan Society. So I took Japanese 1, level 1, the 3rd time, and I said, this time I'm going. And they told me everyone speaks English in Japan. That's not true. If you ever go, don't expect people to speak English. In the hotels, they speak English, but the average person on the street does not speak English. And I had to use the Japanese I learned. First of all, that 14-hour flight, I wanted to pull my hair out, but I didn't want to mess it up. It was crazy. 14 hours on a plane, you want to jump out the window. And then I got there, and they admit the Japanese subway system is the most complicated subway system in the world. And I battled it every day, every single day. I was lost every day in Japan, and I didn't let it stop me. I went to every city. I went from Tokyo to Kyoto, and then I spent a day in Osaka. I took the bullet train. I used the Japanese that I had. I did 2 comedy shows while I was over there, and I found my way around, and I proved to myself that I could do it. Despite the fact that I was lost, literally every day I'd be in a place where I was lost, and there was almost no one. Like in New York, when you get off the subway, it's pretty easy to find your way to the street. There's always steps and they lead up to the street. Not in Japan. First of all, in Japan, the subways are 4 or 5 levels down. You have to keep taking escalators down, down, down. And when you get off the train, there's not one exit. Sometimes there's 18 to 20 different exits. So it's not enough to know your stop. You have to know what exit to get out. The first day, I was stuck underground for an hour. I couldn't get out. And I was starting to panic, to be honest with you. I was getting very nervous until I found a person who spoke just a little bit of English. And they guided me to an exit. I'd still be there now if I didn't find that person. I'd be talking to you in Japanese.
That's
it was
right.
amazing to me.
We'd find you for a Kol Nidre donation. Don't worry about it.
It was amazing to me. But I did it, and that's the point. And that's a whole chapter in this book, Fight the Fear. I did a chapter on my trip to Europe, because I went to Europe by myself. I went to the Cannes Film Festival. I had some short films that I made in the Cannes Film Festival. I went alone. And I battle my fear on a daily basis. And so there's a chapter on my heart attack, and a chapter on my COVID, double pneumonia, and just fighting fear in general. These last 2 years, we've all been affected by fear. And I have to tell you that the fear is trapped inside of me. Sometimes I'm sitting home at night and I don't feel well. I'll get a headache or something. The fear is inside me. I feel like I'm getting sick again, like I got COVID again. Because when you have a traumatic experience, there's something called cellular memory. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a very fascinating thing. It means that every single thing that's happened to you since you're born is still inside of you. Everything you've ever experienced in your senses. So it's the reason why you could hear a song you like and it'll remind you of the boy or girl you liked in the 3rd grade. Or you smell a perfume and you're like, wow, my kindergarten teacher wore that perfume. It's like a sensory deja vu. It takes you back in time without even having to think about it, And that's amazing to me, but that's what you have to battle. So my fear, even though intellectually I know that I'm probably don't have COVID, but my body tightens up and I get nervous inside, and that fear comes back. And I have to rationalize with myself and tell myself I'm okay. I take my temperature. I still have thermometers around my house because I was taking my temperature all the time. And when I see it comes out normal, I feel so relieved, But it's just a thing. So we've all been surrounded with fear, and we're all a lot more sensitive than we even imagine, than we like to admit to. Sensitivity is a topic that I talk about a lot, but we internalize things, which is why music is so important. I got to tell you this story. At the end of October, I got a phone message from a man who said, I'm calling you in reference to a letter that you sent me 20 years ago. 20 years ago. He had never seen it before. His assistant filed it away, and now he's working on his memoirs. And it turns out that man, his name is Stephen Halpern, and he's considered the father of New Age music. And when I do my star therapy to take away headaches and physical pain, I do it with music, and I always use Stephen Halpern's music. He's very mystical. And I must have sent him a letter. I don't remember doing it, but he had it. So I must have sent him a letter 20 years ago telling him how important his music was to me and how many people it's helped. Well, he said that my letter moved him so much. Whatever I wrote, he said it moved him so much that he wanted to try to track me down. Unfortunately, my phone number hasn't changed in 20 years. we got in touch and we started talking every day, and I had so much in common with him. And he said to me, I want to put music to your words. And he said, send me a guided meditation and I'll put music to it. Now this guy's a Grammy-nominated musician. He's world famous. And now I have a project. We just finished it a couple of weeks ago. It's called Journey to Your Heart. And it's a guided meditation with music by Stephen Halpern. And he put visuals to it. This is also amazing. He said to me, do you have any video of you doing your energy work with your hands? And I said, I had this vague memory. And then I remembered 10 years ago, a woman contacted me, a photographer, and she said she was doing work on healing energy. And she wanted to know if she could film me doing that. And I said, sure. So I had a subject that I was working on, and she came. And I didn't remember her name. And I searched through my old computers, and I found her name. And I contacted her. I said, I don't know if you'd remember me. And she said, I remember you very well, and I have the pictures. And she sent them to me, and Stephen Halpern put them into this project. So now I have a project with music and photos and his music in there, and it's on his website. And it just shows that you have no idea what's going to happen in your life. Like amazing things happen. Everyone has a path, and you couldn't possibly foresee something like that. 20 years later, and then with her photos, 10 years later, people remember. And I like that story because it just shows that it's important to have hope in your life. You know, some days may be bad, but we're not mind readers. You don't know who you're going to meet. Every single person in your life that you know, besides your family, there was a day before you met them. You had no idea you were going to meet them. And then the next day you meet them, and they become someone important in your life. So it's a great message for me. You know, it was very inspirational. And now I wind up with a project with Stephen Halpern.
I'm not surprised being you.
Odd things happen to me, and very, very interesting things. When you say, and I'm grateful every day, you know. In my prayers, I use prayer a lot, you know, and I always say prayers of gratitude. I have a long gratitude list. There are things that I want, goals that I have that I haven't reached, whatever, you know, but I think everyone has that. But I once heard some genius say that happiness is wanting what you already have. You know, my first book on happiness is called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And there's a picture of a meditating dog on the cover, a dog in lotus position, sitting on an orange pillow. And I have it outside. I wish I had it here to show you. But I got an email about 2 weeks ago from a doctor in Georgia. And she said, I'm writing to tell you that your book helped me recover from serious heart surgery. And she invited me to be a speaker on a women's health network that I did last week. It was amazing. She said that the reason it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind is it had nothing to do with heart disease. It's about, from the time we're children, every time someone hurts your feelings or breaks a promise to you or hurts you in some way or breaks up with you in a relationship, those pains stay in your heart chakra, and I call them heart wounds, and they affect your self-esteem, and they affect your self-confidence, and they affect every decision that you make in your life, because every time you're called upon to make a decision, you use your thoughts to figure out what to do. And if some of your thoughts are not valid, your decisions are not going to work for you, which is the reason why certain people have patterns in their lives, the same bad job over and over again, the same bad relationship over and over again that doesn't work out. And the only common denominator is you. You're the only person that keeps showing up. Everything else changes. So I have this saying that you can't get better with the same mind that got you sick. People who, like, I spent the last 20 years, on the board of the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy. Now, I'm not a classically trained psychotherapist, but I presented my work to them in 1999, and they accepted my work, and I became part of the board, and I wound up lecturing at energy psychology conferences about changing thought. And I recently lectured to the doctors at Temple University, the school I graduated from, which was a nightmare of an experience for me. That's a whole other story. But the dean of the school, who was not the dean when I went, heard about me and invited me to do a series of weekly lectures to the doctors about thought, about how to change from frustration to enjoyable and from hate to love. And he said to me, can you ever imagine that the dean of a school would ask you to do that? I said, in my wildest dreams, I could never imagine that, because that school tortured me. It was the worst experience of my life. And I'm not just saying that. He admitted to me that when I went to the school, the doctors were racist and anti-Semites. And they picked on me, and they tried to make me drop out of school. And I would never give in. And I grew a mustache, because that was popular in those days. I was banned from school. I wasn't allowed to see patients for 3 weeks because I had a mustache. And the main guy that gave me the most trouble had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, "The South will rise again." And he had a shaved head, and he hated me, and he took it out on me literally every day that I was in school. And I said, my parents said to me, if you want to drop out, we'll understand. And I said, I'll never let them get the best of me. I'll never let them stand in my way. It brings tears to my eyes to think about it. And so many years later, the dean of that same school contacted me, and that's why he said, could you ever believe that something like that would happen? I said, in a million years. And then he hired me to do a comedy show for the school on Christmas, for the faculty and the staff and all the students. So I wound up lecturing to them and doing that. And then when he met me in New York, after he heard my story, I started to tell him what a hard time I had there. And he knew. He said, he had heard. He said, you weren't the only one. You were treated the worst, but you weren't the only one. And after the thing, he said to me, can I give you a hug? And I said, absolutely. and he brought another dean with him. So I have this picture of these two really conservative deans and me in the middle. You can imagine how funny that picture is. And that's how life is, that you never know. You never know what's going to happen. But when you think positively, it's almost like you can manifest certain things in your life. The same way when you think negatively, you manifest negative things. You can bring your worst fears into your life. It's the reason why many cancer phobes actually wind up getting cancer. If you think about something so much, you're putting so much energy into that, you're liable to draw it into your life. So it's very important to try to stay positive, and comedy does that.
Yes, it does. So you're a dentist, you're a professor, because he was a dental professor as well.
A clinical professor.
Clinical professor.
At NYU.
I don't want to get that wrong. You're an author, you make movies, you write comedy, you perform stand-up comedy. What's left?
You want to hear the sick thing? And this is the truth. Sometimes I feel like I don't do anything. And it's a sickness. Yeah, it's like, if I wrote it down, like sometimes I have to write down, there's a lot of hyphens in my name. I know I do a lot of things, but if I'm not always creating something, I feel like I'm not doing anything. And, you know, you can take that too far also. I try not to. I try to create a balance. The spiritual part of my life has allowed me to create a balance, because show business is all about ego, and ego is ugly. You know, I always say, like, if you go in to buy a shirt, the guy just gives you the shirt. He doesn't give you a shirt and a picture of himself and say, you know, this is who I am and this is what I do. But in the entertainment business, you're always telling people who you are and what you do and what you've done and what you want to do. And, you know, ego blown out of proportion is not healthy. So it's important to have a balance and to have humility in your life and realize that all these things are gifts. You know, I look at it as I've had special opportunities, you know, that were open to me. The real gifts are the relationships that you have with people. You know, show business is a crazy business. Somebody recently said it's a business for people who don't belong in it, because it's very hard. It wears you down. There's a lot of rejection, and you have to feel very good about yourself. And for a person who used to stutter, I have to make sure that my self-esteem is very good all the time. Because I could start stuttering again tomorrow, but I won't let myself. I refuse to stutter. You know, when I was in dental school, they really tried to destroy my self-confidence, and it took me a long time to get it back. Because it's very hard when people are like very negative around you, very derogatory. As I said, I'm an empath. I take everything very deeply. So when I feel something, I feel it all the way into my heart. When you learn something too, you know, the first time you learn something, if it makes sense to you, you learn it intellectually, you learn it in your head. But when you really learn it is when it travels to your heart. And the distance from your head to your heart is different for everybody. And so I use that when I teach people how not to stutter. Some people get better very quickly, and some people take a long time, because it has to make sense to you. And you have to be willing to think in a different way than you've always thought. As I said, you can't get better with the same mind that got you sick. When you want to change, you have to become a different person, and you have to be willing to open yourself up to new thoughts that you haven't had before. And that to me is fascinating. Open yourself up to new thoughts.
Well, when I say we, Brian, when Brian first came up with the idea for this speaker series, we wanted to have interesting people that could help expand our mind, and certainly us being a synagogue, we're always looking to expand our spirituality. And I just wanted to say thank you, because I know tonight you've expanded my spirituality. You've given me just a ton to think about. Your message on positivity, and it just really resonates, your message on fear. I think it's important as a congregation that we hear this message and we take it as part of, as Jews, we're not as dogmatic as some other religions. We're just really looking to grow, and we're looking to make the world a better place. And I just want to say, for me and for the congregation, that you do make this world a better place. It's been an honor to spend this time with you. And I thank you very much.
That's so kind of you to say. And I thank all of you for being here. I just want to say that, thank you, that it's also an honor for me. And I try to cater what I was saying to a Jewish audience who understands this. Just coincidentally, this afternoon, I did a podcast with a rabbi on the east side of Manhattan, who I don't know why it happened on the same day, but we stress education, we stress opening your mind to different things. We want the world to be a better place. And I have to thank you for inviting me, because it's very special. You're a great host. And I know I didn't give you a chance to talk too much, because I have a lot to say, as you could notice. Since I stopped stuttering, there's no stopping me. I just go. I hate dead air, and so, but I really appreciate it. You're a wonderful person, and I thank you so much for inviting me. This is very special. So.
Again, Jeff Gurian, thank you. And we're going to also put on the website, we're going to put up a list of all Jeff's books if anyone's interested.
I have some with me, by the way. If anyone is interested, I'll be happy to sign one. I have comedy books, and I have my books on happiness as well. So if anybody wants anything, I'll write something personal to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for coming.
It's great.